fascinating things about your experiences with a miasmatic remedy that I've given you recently. And a miasmatic remedy is prepared in the same way that all other homeopathic remedies are, which is highly dilute, but it's often made out of a no-sode, and it is a remedy that has the potential to reach deep into your
Ancestral.
your
Yeah.
ancestral and family history. So
Yeah.
you've had some really interesting things to say about that.
Well, first let me tell you a little bit about my experiences with homeopathy when I started, and so you can understand
Sure.
like how this experience has been different than anything else I've ever done.
Sure.
So I started doing homeopathy in Seattle. I think somewhere around like 1995. So I guess that would be 25 years ago, and it instantaneously made a huge difference in my life. And I've had some very sort of unique and interesting remedy experiences. One of the most unique ones I tell people was my mother was a smoker, and there's a reason why I'm telling this, because I think it connects to this what we were talking about, the miasms. My mother was a smoker, and I breathed her smoke for years and years and years. And I used to have sort of a tolerance to it. I played Irish fiddle. I'd go to the Irish clubs. I don't like smoke. I never smoked myself, but I could tolerate being around people who smoked. And then one day, my homeopath, going through different remedies over months and years, gave me this remedy. I don't even remember what it was. And I went home, and sometime after that, I felt, literally, the smoke leave my body. Like I could smell it. I could almost like taste it. And it like came out of me. And one thing I tell people who haven't had this experience before, that very often, if something like that happens, which it happens a lot in homeopathy, you need to take a shower, like a deep cleansing shower, clean your clothes, and like wash your sheets, because sometimes the remedy it comes out of you and it gets into the sheets, and then it comes back on you. But I knew enough to do that, and I did that. And when I next went to the Irish bar, I couldn't take smoke at all. Like even the littlest particle of smoke would immediately make me sick, sort of like a drug addict who detoxed. But I had this from one dose of one remedy, and it's never come back. Meaning I have never ever, in all these years that it's been 20 plus years, had any tolerance for cigarette smoke ever again.
I see. Well, but you feel like this is an improvement.
Absolutely. I used to worry about secondhand smoke quite a lot. And my mother actually apologized to me about that, which was the only time in her whole life she apologized about anything. And that was very meaningful to me that she did do that. But I still worried about it. I mean, I have my own health crises that I have created for myself, but I worried about this thing that was sort of artificially done to me ever since I was a small kid, all the way through when I was a young adult until I moved out of my parents' house. And when that happened, I felt like that was no longer an issue. Like the secondhand smoke, that sort of family curse from my mother, and just in this lifetime, was lifted. And I would not have to suffer from that. It was as if I'd gone back in the time and never taken that smoke in.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went through this experience, which we'll talk about in depth, about taking this miasmatic remedy, it started to feel kind of like that, except for more like this was the family curse that had been passed down, that I wasn't even really aware of, that I didn't have any causes or conditions in my own life that created some of these health and spiritual blockages. But by taking this remedy, I found all this stuff unwinding and almost like sort of past life ancestral energy being cleared. And it's still going on. I took a 1M of this remedy, was about a month and a half ago, right? Somewhere around there. And I had instantaneously and very intense reactions. I tend to be the kind of person, I'm very subtly aware of subtle energies, so I like the higher potencies, the 1Ms, the 10Ms, and the 50Ms that are more diluted and operate on a subtler level. I think I get more out of them. But in this case, I think I would have said, oh no, heck no, I should not have taken a 1M of this remedy. So then I thought I could like downgrade it by taking a 30C, I believe it was. And I kind of like told Abby that the sort of the parallel in terms of the symptoms that came up or the experiences that came up were, if the 1M was like downing, you know, ouzo, like the 30C was like a beer, right, or some wine, but I still could feel it ongoing. So then I even like tried, actually I think the 1M was like downing ouzo, the 30C was like a mixed drink, right? And then I even went down lower and I took a LM potency that I diluted in, no, actually I didn't take an LM potency. I took a 30C, but we diluted it in water, and that was with the idea that I would take it every day for a while, because clearly it was doing something for me. And I don't know why I did this, but I was like, one day I was like, I'm just going to drink this whole bottle. So this was not under her advice, which brings us to something we'll be talking about, which is you need to listen to your professional homeopath, even if she's your wife. She knows what she's doing, and they have experience in these kinds of things. So I don't know why I did that. I was like, I was just doing, it's been around, it's doing something for me, man. I'm just and then the next day it was like, woo! And it's been a month, over a month, where I've had tons of effects, and we'll go into a lot of the effects. But the very interesting thing was that I've never had this experience before. I've had remedies where I had very powerful releases, like when I found my constitutional remedy of Natmer and took a Natmer 10M, I had this powerful release of all my sadness around my mother and rejection issues with her, and I literally cried for, I actually technically didn't take an 10M, that's a long story, but I had been taking Natmer, and then I read the whole chapter in the Bailey book about the Natmer, and I had this very powerful, like, big Natmer experience where I cried for like 12 hours straight about all my rejection issues with my mother. Why wouldn't my mother accept my love? She was a wounded person. And that created this Natmer constitution for me. To this date, that was probably the biggest reaction to a remedy that I personally had. I have seen other very big reactions to remedies. But whenever I've had a big reaction to a remedy or whatever, and it gets unpleasant, because, you know, healing's not always easy, you can always antidote it, right? You could, A, take another remedy, B, take the same remedy at a lower dose, D, you know, brush your teeth with peppermint, you know, or other things that antidote remedies. But I could not antidote this miasmatic remedy, no matter what. I started having major issues with my feet from this. I've had a lot of old issues with my feet in terms of red bumps, and they started coming out in a way that I've never experienced before. It's insane. They were flaring up. So I thought, okay, well, part of me was like, well, I should just keep going with this remedy because it's doing something very powerful to me, and I shouldn't be tampering with it. But at a certain point, one night, I was like, I can't take anymore. I'm taking some sulfur. And the sulfur helped, I took like a 200C, and it helped a little. But the miasmatic remedy kept going. Oh, and I need to say one thing about this miasmatic remedy. Why I knew it kept going was it created a very definitive odor in me, and I mean in everything. I could feel it in my hair, smell it in my hair, smell it on my skin, smell it in my breath, smell it in my bowel movements, smell it in my urine, smell it when I blew my nose. I mean, and when I was taking the higher potency, like the 1M, it was very, very, very intense. And yet, at the lower potencies, it's still there, and it's still been there the entire time. It's like still there. Now, Abby, she hasn't really been able to detect this smell, which is good, because if we weren't on staying at home, maybe other people might not like to be around me right now. But I can detect
I
it.
actually detected a very strong odor before you took the remedy.
Right. That is.
It was a very objectionable odor, which I haven't detected since you started taking it.
Right. And I detected that odor too, which was very fascinating, because that odor, which was sort of similar, that odor was more of a, when I would sweat or work out, it was more of a real gym bag odor, which I usually don't have. I mean, I have it, but it's not like very pungent, and this was like, whoo, like I would like work out, and I was like, oh, this shirt cannot go in the laundry hamper to be washed sometime later. It's got to be washed now. Otherwise, nobody around this house is going to be able to survive. But when I took this miasmatic remedy and I started having this different kind of odor, which I've been likening to Abby, telling her that it's kind of like compost, or it's very earthy, or like digging in the dirt, the wet dirt with the mushrooms. It has this, and it's not a mushroom remedy. We're not saying the remedy just because.
No, you did say the remedy.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. Well, if I did, that's fine. But we're not saying the remedy for a lot of reasons, but just personal reasons. I don't want to reveal it, and also, I don't want everybody to go, oh, well, I'm just going to go out and take this remedy. Consult with your professional homeopath before you do something big like this. So my feet kept blowing up like crazy. And sulfur always helps me when my feet do that. But it got so bad, I've never experienced anything like that. And at one point I was like, I just can't take this remedy, miasmatic remedy anymore. I want to do something about it. So I'm like, I'm going to get a 50 M sulfur. Now, if this doesn't antidote it, nothing will. But what happened was I woke up and my feet were good. They had totally cleared up. And yet, the miasmatic remedy effect is still going on. So what it's been like for me is this. It's like it's going around my body and my psyche, and every old issue that I've ever had. Like I had this knee that I injured at the skating rink. Well, it brought that up. And then it cleared up in a way that it never had. It started cracking, and I think the knee got compressed when I fell on it on the ice, and all of a sudden it would crack and crack and crack, but it wouldn't just crack and be painful. Actually, it wasn't painful. It would crack and extend. And then I started realizing after a day or two that my limbs are now evened out in a way that they hadn't been before. What was some of the other old things that are? I started feeling like my intense Natmer sadness again. My mother has passed on, and sometimes I miss her, and I feel sad about it. And that Natmer, I need to cry, but I can't cry, and I'm going around and eating every salty thing I can get my hands on until I suddenly go, oh, take a Natmer. And it would come on very intensely, and I would take the Natmer, and it would clear up like it always would. But then the miasmatic remedy would say, okay, check that one off the list. Now we're going for your next.
One that I thought was really interesting.
Your next one
was you had this strange phobia.
Oh, that's very right. Let's talk about this phobia. I've had this phobia for my entire life, and I've talked to Abby about it. It's generally a thing that I don't have to actually, doesn't hold me back, but it's weird. The basic phobia is that I have this, I'm a very confident person. I like speaking in front of people, but I've always had this phobia that if that I need some sort of introduction. Like, I have no fear of public speaking, but I want someone to say, "This is George. He's going to talk," and I can start talking. And the fear is that if I start talking on molecular biology, somebody will say, "This is the D&D, panel," right? And I'll go, "Oh my God, I'm in the wrong place."
So basically, it's a fear of being in the wrong place.
Being in the wrong place.
You're in a new, you're supposed to be going to this new place.
Like a party, for example. Right. If I go into your party, I have the address, I double check it 5 times, because if I knock on the door, I have this irrational fear that the person's going to open the door, and I'm going to say, "Hey, is this a party?" And they're going to say, "Wrong!" And it did happen to me one time. They said, "No, it's the next door neighbors." And I don't know why I was so mortified. What's the big deal? I can just walk over. So I avoid it by always double, triple checking, making sure, that I know it's the right place, or best, I have someone take me there, It's like, that this is the protocol, and this is how it's done. And I've tried to figure out where this came from. I don't even know. I actually think this is kind of a past life thing, because I've always had it, and I do not have any specific experiences in my life where there's other things that I have fear of, like we talked about. I have a fear of slugs because I had this specific experience when I was 5 years old, where I was playing outside and I lifted this board and there was 5,000 slugs under there, and it freaked me out. But this is from nowhere. So as I'm in this miasmatic state, and not too long after, I believe I'd either had the knee cracking thing that I took the remedy, or the feet, or maybe it was the Natmar. I don't remember which one, but it seems like there was one just before that. "Oh, I feel sad about my mother. Take Natmar." Then all of a sudden, this old fear comes up, and there's nothing precipitating the fear. Meaning, I'm sitting in my living room. I'm not trying to go to a party, and it comes up, and I'm describing to Abby this feeling again, and I've had this feeling many times, and I've described it to her many times. But this time, at the end of this conversation, and I'm really feeling it the whole time, at the end of this conversation, I go, "Well, that's kind of stupid. Why was I ever afraid of that? I'm not really sure I'd ever be afraid of that again." And it was like, so what it feels like is that there's this list of all things George needs to clear out. And I took this remedy, and it's not going to stop until check that one off the list, check that one off the list, cross that one off the list, and maybe I have to have my feet blow up a couple times to cross it off, and take the sulfur or this and cross it off. So that's what it's been like.
Yeah, well, it's been really interesting for me to see the things that it's opened up for you, and to think of the things I know about your ancestors that it ties back into.
Yeah, would you talk about what it was that made you want to give me this remedy in the first place? Because I wasn't looking for this.
Well, there were a lot of symptoms. I'd have to go get the list of what they are. But one of the main ones was when your sister was telling us about your was it your great-great-grandfather?
Grandfather.
Your grandfather, who was known for being very short in stature.
Right, and my father was too.
Yeah.
And what have you always said about my stature?
Well, that you have kind of a very long trunk in comparison with your legs.
Right.
So it's more of a sort of dwarfish type look.
And so any of you who are professional homeopaths, I'm sure you probably know what the remedy is. I may have actually slipped and said it, but that's okay. But this is we're not trying to talk about that remedy. We're trying to talk about the experience.
Yeah, so it was very interesting for me to see, as you've been pointing out, that not only did this touch on some very deep things for you, and that I could see connect with your family history, but also that it kept going in spite of all the other remedies that you took. So, you took remedies to address the things that came up, and it's always good to really consider this progress carefully, because often when you take another remedy, it will antidote the previous
Right.
remedy, and sometimes completely put an end to any continuing healing that first remedy would do. So I'm always cautious about that.
Right, and I am too, because I've been taught that by her and by other homeopaths, and I've had that experience myself, though I must admit, earlier in my homeopathic journey, I was more the typical person who was just popping remedies left and right, and I've learned that if you let them simmer, sometimes it can be really good. But I definitely got to a point where, like, okay, I've had enough of this. I am antidoting this remedy. And then the funny thing is, I couldn't antidote it. This is the only remedy I've never been I couldn't antidote.
Right. And so it's been a bit of a challenge for you having this experience, but at this point you're feeling like it's been a worthwhile journey, and you're feeling stronger. And
Yeah, I mean, I think and this I think is a good segue into another very important topic of healing aggravations, and it's it's easy to say, oh well, I just the only problem I have is my hangnails, and I just want my hangnails to be better, and then I'm good, right? But there may be things that are holding you back from experiences that you never even dreamed is possible, and you don't even know that it's possible. You don't even know. Like, I would say, for me, I've always struggled with my weight, and I've lost a lot of weight, and I've learned how to do things and eat better foods and exercise and all that. But I also, hit plateaus, and then nothing happens, no matter how hard I'm trying. And I remember Oprah Winfrey saying one time that her trainer told her, one day this won't be a struggle for you. You'll be changed, and it won't be a struggle for you. And she was like, how dare you say this? You don't know what we've been through as people who were born like this. And I've certainly felt that in my life a lot. Like, you just don't understand. It's this never-ending struggle. And anyone who's been overweight has experienced this. But there's a part of me that always wanted to believe, and now it's starting to believe, that if I could unlock in Field of Dreams all the cosmic tumblers and and clear myself of the ancestral debris and put an end to those experiences, which I'm a very spiritual person, mystical person, which I actually believe helps your ancestors, even though they're not in the here physically. It helps them also move on, that you can be a hero for, just like people say, oh, my father was abusive to me, therefore I'm going to be the hero who's not abusive to my children. I believe you can be a hero for your whole line. As a matter of fact, I think that is my interpretation of exactly what this miasmatic process is. It's like, this is the thing that the family story or the family energy that needs to be worked through, so you can be the champion and clear it out. And so it's been a struggle for many people in my family, on my mother's side, with weight. And I know this issue is sort of more from my father's side, but I'm, sort of optimistic that Um, well, okay, what I really think it's addressing and what I'm really optimistic about is that I think my father and his fathers, and I'm assuming going back, they were really talented, smart individuals, and they were never really recognized by the world. Their stature,
Yes.
right,
Right.
was
There's more to them than
right.
their physical form would indicate.
And I feel that is very true with me. And it seems like I've tried everything, and I've never been able to sort of finally get over that hump where people see me for who I really am, my talent and my drive and intelligence and all of that. So, I'm optimistic that through this experience that I was not actively asking about, though right now I really am very much pursuing my dreams in a big way, and I'm really going to need to address that issue of people seeing me as I really am, noticing. I'm optimistic now that because I am pursuing my dreams like this and I really need this issue to be solved, my homeopath said, and she tried to get me to do this before too, and I was like, eh. She kept saying, this might be a good remedy for you, and I was like, eh. And she finally said, I really think this might be a good remedy for you. And I said, okay, I'll try it. And then it was like, woo, right?
The roller coaster ride began.
Release the Kraken. But it also gives me optimism on the side of my mother's issue and the weight, that maybe this remedy or possibly another remedy might unlock that family dynamic where everybody in that family, except for my aunt, she was the only one, but almost everybody else in my mother's side of the family struggled with obesity, no matter what they did. You know, it's just they couldn't break out of it. And so then, of course, they just said, well, I might as well just eat Greek food, and, you know, and there's nothing wrong with Greek food, but, you know, it's just like, it's not health food, right? Once in a while, it's good, but, you know, we sit there and eat Greek Easter cookies all day long. So, you know, so I'm optimistic, because I've never personally, even though I've been doing homeopathy for 25 years, I've never had a remedy that kept going, like the Energizer Bunny, and seemed to connect. The A was prescribed to me simply because of an observation my homeopath made about my ancestry.
Right.
Primarily.
And there are many other more immediate symptom connections.
But that was the big one.
Right. That was the one that made me think, wow, we really have to go.
We gotta give it a try.
Go for this.
Right, we gotta give it a try. And I wasn't like, she was like, you gotta try it. And I was like, well. And so, but I know from experience that, and let's talk about healing aggravations for a little bit.
Yeah.
As this is the way I see it, which is different the way she says it, maybe we can sort this out, but the way I think about these remedies and having a reaction to them is, A, if something's happening, that's good. Nothing happening, it's not good. People say, if people read your book and say, I hate this book, hey, art provokes reaction, and any reaction that is provoked is better than just, right. So that's number one. So don't be afraid of something happening. You want something to happen. And your experience as a client over time, when you make a long-term commitment to this process, will be to train you to understand that something happening is always good. You'll get to the other side of it enough times to know that, wow, suddenly my knee that I didn't think had a problem was perfectly fine, which was always an inch too short ever since I was 8 years old, is now lined up in a way, and it's just I can kick the soccer ball and do other things that I never dreamed I could do. So I tell people, or what I think about it is either the remedy is like completely wrong and just does nothing, and so then that's just like, okay, I'm wrong, I have to look deeper, I have to match the clues better, i.e. the homeopath, and find out what a closer match is. Or you have a healing aggravation, which means something's happening and you're working through it and you're going to get to the other side. Or sometimes, and I've seen this with my own eyes, it's just so spot on and you're ready to just release whatever it is that it's like, whammo, you have a instant and miraculous transformation. Or it's not exactly the right remedy, but the aggravations that come from it are clues that will help the homeopath guide you to a closer remedy. It's like close but no cigar. So when it's close but no cigar or just working through it, you shouldn't stop and just say, all right, something bad happened, therefore I quit, right?
Right. And
Let me finish.
Okay.
And this is something that you asked me to do this because you wanted me to tell clients the things that I know from doing this for a long time that they may not know. What I know that you may not know is that as hard as it is for a professional homeopath to consult and to analyze the information that they're getting, to observe in the correct way as they've been trained, to use the resources in the correct way to find a match, I would say it's equally hard, if not harder, to ascertain between, is this a healing aggravation or is this wrong, close but no cigar? And what I know that you may not know is the countless hours of training that homeopaths and their homeopathic schools, mentors, standards, and hundreds of years of accumulated knowledge go into this question about, is this a healing aggravation or is this wrong, potency-wise and or remedy-wise, and how do we get from there to the perfect place? That's something that they study in excruciating depth, and that is a skill that I think is even harder to do by an amateur. Even an amateur like me, who's been doing this, taking remedies for a long time, than a professional. And that's something that you don't know unless you live with a professional and you see the amount of training that goes into answer that one question. Because that one question is this healing and you just need to let it go through? Or do you need to antidote it? Or do you need to rethink it? Is something that is very tricky, and even the best homeopaths in the world have to, I wouldn't say struggle with, but they really have to apply so much thought, energy, wisdom, skill to answer that question every single time it comes up. So what I would like to say to everybody and implore you is that what you need to do is you need to take careful observations of every single thing that's happening to you, and you need to write them down and tell her your dreams, your what do you call them? Things that you like to taste and don't like to taste. What's the word for that?
Oh, your food preferences.
Your food cravings and your aversions and your moods, and you've got to be like a...
Even strange little coincidences
strange,
that come up
right.
after taking the remedy.
You need to be like a detective, okay? Like Harriet the Spy of yourself, right? And that's where the fun is, right? It's an exhilarating experience. And you can start to see, as you talk with her, oh my God, how does this symbol connect with this and this and that and this? And oh, it all comes together and it all makes sense. It's like solving a mystery, and the mystery of you. And then you've got to trust the process, and you've got to trust your homeopath.
And communicate with your homeopath.
Well, yes, you have to collect all this information, communicate it to the homeopath, but then you have to trust that they say, you know, I really, really think this is a healing aggravation. I know this remedy is because sometimes it doesn't just happen overnight, instantaneously. Now the beautiful thing is, sometimes it does. And I always tell this story, and I'm going to tell this story about my father. My father, I got a call from my cousin. I was living in Seattle. My parents were in Norfolk, Virginia. I got a call from my cousin. Says, you need to get over there, get to Virginia right now. Your father is basically catatonic. He's not responding to people. He's not really eating much of anything. He's unshaven, unclean, and not in total dementia. So, with a little help of my then friend, well, she's still my friend Kaylin was in homeopathy school. This was actually before Abby was in homeopathy school. And some thought on my own, I came up with a remedy that I thought might work. And I went to Virginia Beach, and indeed I found my father in this state. Now, Abby was already getting interested in homeopathy and learning about it, and I may have even talked to you about it too, I don't remember, but I definitely talked to Kaylin about it extensively, and I decided to give him this remedy. So I go there, and he's like, nothing. And that's not like him at all, ever. He's always been, active and cooking and in the kitchen and, son, sit down, whoa. And so I took the remedy and put it under his tongue. And he was like this. How long has this been going on? 2 months. Well, thanks for telling me, Mom. Okay. No, none of us knew. None of us, the siblings didn't know. So, we go away to a bookstore and we have lunch and we browse at this bookstore. It was this cool little bookstore where you could get all kinds of it was like a health food store, and they had a little deli, and by the time we drove there and spent an hour there and came back, it was like an hour and a half to 2 hours total time had elapsed. One remedy. Came back, he had gotten up, he had shaved, he had showered, and he was cooking us spaghetti. And then my father was back. Now, from then till maybe 8 or 9 years later when he died in his 90s, he had little episodes of dementia now and then, but he never went back into that catatonic state. And I believe that even those little episodes could have been helped by this remedy. I left it with my mother, and I told her that if he goes into any little dementia state, just give him just one little drop under his tongue, and it will probably fix out. And my mother said, I'm not doing that. And so short of basically moving back to, my hometown, moving in with my parents at 40-something years old with my wife, and to administer the one drop every 2 months or 2 weeks when he needed it. But even still, even with that, he never went back. And so what I like to tell people is, expect that you're going to have something like that, because it can and does happen. That's not the only time I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen quite a lot. But when it's not happening, don't be like, I tried this. And I tell people, how many times did you try going to, other systems that were toxic and cost a lot of money and required surgery and still left you in pain? Did you really, people don't usually get, myself did not, to a homeopath till you've suffered immensely in other systems, more, traditional systems, which may work for some people, but it didn't work for me. By the time I got to a homeopath, I had chronic bronchitis every year, multiple times a year with high fevers. I had chronic sinusitis multiple times a year with high fevers. I was overweight. I had the most horrible acne that I went to dermatologists for years and years and took antibiotics for, and had lancings and injections of cortisol on a regular basis. I had chronic back pain all the time. I was not even 30 years old, or just 30 years old, with all of this, okay? And I still am suffering, even though I've lost a lot of weight, from the effects of eating bad foods, yes, but also taking what I would say is bad medicine, okay, for acne. It all started when I had acne when I was 14 years old. My mother took me to a dermatologist. They put me on antibiotics, and I was on antibiotics from 14 to 24. And when I got off the antibiotics, my health just plummeted immediately. All those things, bronchitis, sinusitis, whatever. So I finally found homeopathy. I finally made it to a homeopath. I used to also have gastric reflux problems that were so bad that I would literally be in the back of a restaurant, throwing up routinely. I would say at least once a week. Excuse me here. So homeopathy changed all of that for me. All of it. And it didn't happen overnight, but sometimes it did. But I stuck with the process. So most people don't come to a homeopath until they've been through all that. And they've tried, and believe me, I went to every ear, nose, and throat doctor that you could possibly go to. I did it all.
Multiple sinus surgeries.
Sinus surgeries, that's right. I had sinus surgeries. Had a sinus surgery. The sinus surgery was a lovely man. It was very good and did make a big difference. The sinus surgery was intense. I woke up throwing up blood. I had to get my ex-girlfriend to drive me home. I was in extreme pain for at least a month and a half. I had to take Oxycontins. As a matter of fact, it almost got me, this is a joke, but it's sort of a serious joke, it almost got me fired from my job because I realized that when I would take these, codeine, Tylenol things, that I would have a very, let's just say, amorous reaction. Nothing in terms of public display of anything, but just, instead of being like, yes, I'll have that report on your desk by 5, I would be sort of like, do you know how pretty you are? Stuff like that. So, I said this to a coworker. That's why I would always feel like, okay, it's the lunch hour. I'm taking my Oxycontins now. Because I was in such pain that I had to do it. And I would eat my lunch alone. But this coworker, who was beautiful, and came up to see me about something, and I said something like, "You look so pretty." And she's married too, by the way. And she turned beet red, and ran out of the room. And then later, when the drugs wore off, I had to go down to her and explain to her, I brought my little pills with me to show her, because she'd never seen this kind of behavior before for me, this unprofessional behavior. Maybe other things, but not this, right? And explained to her that I was on drugs for my sinus surgery, or when I had the sinus surgery, and the drugs made me a little frisky. So, it's like pouring it, scotch and tonic, and then going back to work in the 90s at a tech company in a very PC, professional environment. So, thanks doctors. I mean, I almost got fired too, but she understood and she didn't press charges.
Right.
So
these are some of the side effects you experience with mainstream care, and not only that, but the sinus surgeries that you went through so much pain.
I had to have another one.
You had to have another one.
Within a year and a half, and the surgeon was like, "Well, this never happens. I don't understand." And after I had the second one, that's when I started getting clued in to homeopathy. Now, I didn't know this, but my sister had been going to a homeopath since the 80s. I was living in Seattle, and I think, the story about all this was, the first homeopathic remedy that I ever took was oscillocossinum, the one everybody knows for the flu. And the story for that was, I was ballroom dancing at the time. I was studying with this wonderful woman who was 10-time Russian champion, and I loved dancing with her, and I loved competing. It was a competition in Portland. I was living in Seattle. And a couple of days before the competition, I started to get really sick with the flu. I could feel it coming on. So I went to the health food store, and at the health food store. I said, oh, I got this cold, you know. They said, hey, Osmocosta, man, check it out, right? So I also heard that one of her other students, Merce, was also getting sick with the cold. And that was very urgently important because the way it works in ballroom is that when you compete with your teacher, it's called Pro-Am, you pay for their travel, you pay for their the hotel, the gas, the car, and all that stuff. So you always try to get as many of their students to go, who are going to, you want to go to a competition in Portland, you want to get all their other students to go to a competition in Portland. Well, at that time, the only guy who was really competing was Merce. So it was like either I had to pay all of Ludmilla's travel expenses, or it was like half, right? I could, like, if I could get Merce to go too, it was like half, and half is good, right? So, so he was like, oh no, I'm not feeling well. It's like, oh no, I'm not feeling well either. But I took the oscillocossinum, and I got over it, and I went, and I won, and he didn't go. So
you should have taken him the oscillocossinum.
well, I didn't know at the time. I never, what is this, oxycontin? And since then I've learned that, you know, what this is that it's the yearly flu done in duck.
It's a duck's liver.
Duck's liver and potentized to make homeopathic. And I also learned, it took me a long time, I would always take it every time I get the flu in the year, boom, it works. Then I kept some, now, with most remedies you can keep them forever. But
Actually, I think oscillocossinum is fine to use year after year. It's the influenzinum that is better.
No, well, yeah, that too, but I tell you, the oscillocossinum it doesn't go bad, but what happens was it wasn't as an exact a match for the future flu, and it would work, but not as good. Like, when I would get it every year, you know, I would be just like, oh, flu, boom, take it, oh, great, right? So, influenzinum also, but if you are going to do the oscillocossinum, just spend the damn, whatever, $13 and get it every flu season.
Yeah, I'm not absolutely positive that they changed the formula.
Oh, yes, they are. I think I read it. I can't swear that I read it, but I know from actual experience, yeah, they do. It's updated. So, because I can tell you, I've had old ones where, like, were in my bag and I was out traveling, it's like, oh, I'm so damn sick. And then I'm like, oh, it didn't work. But then I'll go to the store and buy it. Oh, hey.
Well, and that could also just have been that the remedy had been exposed to dampness.
Yeah, but I don't think so. I've had that happen enough times. So we have this argument about this. You don't need to be involved in this. Trust me when I tell you. Spend the money, don't take the risk. Spend the money and update your oscillocossinum every year. It's only $12. It's not going to put you out. You get like 6. You get enough for like 2 flus for one person.
Right, and you don't need to follow the instructions.
And take the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right.
They come in these little vials, and the instructions are to take the whole vial, but you really only need, you can actually cure a whole village with one package of oscillocossinum by putting just a few pellets in, say, half a cup of water in a glass jar or bottle, and just take a sip of that for a dose. And these are tiny little poppy seed sized pellets, so you really just need like the slightest little bit, and then you can...
But you're also supporting homeopathy if you keep boron in business by buying it once a year.
Yes, but better to cure more people.
Yeah, you can buy it. You can buy the 3-pack once a year and use it for your whole family.
Yes.
So it's $12 or whatever it is. It's not even $12 or $13 for a 3-pack. It's not going to break it. But okay, so back to the healing aggravation. So this is something that I want to say, because again, this is about me, what I want to say to you, as somebody who's not only been under homeopathic care for a long time, but under Abby's homeopathic care. And that is, I encourage you to think deeply about the trade-offs of, you know, whatever little healing aggravation you might have for a short period of time, to toxicity, which you will have for a long period of time, right? And understand that it may take a while to
The
get
toxicity being from
drugs.
Non-homeopathic.
Yeah, from being
treatments.
chemical-based drugs. And there has been research about the homeopathic remedy creation process, working, changing things on more of a subatomic level, nanoparticle level. Okay, they don't understand exactly how it all works yet, but you're dealing with something that's more lower energy based than chemical based. Okay, and chemicals are very harsh on your system, if you ask me. So, you know, surgery is very dramatically invasive on your system. And the more of that you do,
yes, also surgery is also suppressive. You're really your vital force has this wonderful, wise, sometimes even poetic way of creating symptoms that will keep you in the best level of health.
And also, it's like Nancy Drew mystery. The symptoms itself are clues to the cure, right? That's your what people I say. What's the difference between alternative medicines and non-alternative medicines? It's really the mind of the practitioner who says everything that happens has a reason, and I'm going to understand it. All she is really is someone who's skilled at helping you sort out the clues.
Right.
And so don't be afraid of these things. Don't say, oh, I just want to go in, do the thing, and get back to my life. Well, you may not even know how vital and wonderful your life could be if you sort through these things. And anything worth having is worth working for. And good health, nobody thinks, oh, well, I walk into the gym, I look around for 5 minutes, but we always joke about that. Whenever we go, I don't know why we do this, we work out at home and stuff, and we do all this stuff. But when we go on the trip somewhere, we always do this. We go to the gym. We go to the gym to see where it is, and we go and say, yeah, and then we never use it. We're on vacation, we never use it. But we should, but we don't. I'll go skating or whatever. Abby will go walk, but it's like, oh, very nice. But if you go into the gym and you're really trying to lose weight or get strong or whatever you're trying to do, get better at your basketball playing, you know that you have to work, and that there will be pain, and you will get sore, and you will get stiff, and you don't say, sore, stiff, no, not for me, that's it. So I encourage people to, when these things happen, to think about, well, are you willing to go through some discomfort, some whatever, to get to the other side where, you could just be like LeBron, and nobody's going to be like LeBron, but you know what I mean, that you can get that ball in the basket, and high-five your friends when you win the game, or are you just going to say, oh, tiniest little something, I'm up. And something very important I want to say about that. Why does that happen a lot? I see it a lot. I see it a lot with friends that I try to get into homeopathy or whatever. I think the reason it happens is this concept called learned helplessness. Most people don't even go to an alternative practitioner until they have tried everything else and had failure after failure after failure after failure, and pain and toxin and high bills and bankruptcies and whatever.
And organs
removed and all this stuff. And so by the time they get to that state, they're now just hopeless. And so they say, okay, I'll try. why not? You give me the remedy, I'll try it.
Here, take some of this.
Okay. And they say, it didn't work the first time, I'll just resign myself to death now. Right? Okay. But you weren't resigning yourself to death the first time you went to your surgeon. The first surgeon, I had the second surgery and the next, you weren't, so you still have to, when you, yes, been through all this stuff that's trained you that nothing works. Well, I like to think of it like a girlfriend or a wife. The story of my life was I had a string of failed relationships, okay? And women that I proposed to, women that I wanted to spend my life with, and they all said, no, I don't know, let me think about it, over and over and over again, right? But I kept my positivity. And eventually, I said to her, hey, will you marry me? And she said, yes, 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 like that, okay? And literally, I had an experience where it went from, within a matter of months, from one of the last failed relationships to finally finding the person that I'm spending my life with. And if I had let, and I do this too, like I'm a writer and I pitch projects, and you get rejected all the time. It's part of the game. And it's very hard, even for me, I've been doing this for a long time, to tell yourself that every single time you try again, the potential is there for it to happen. The magic is there. And you can't let your learned helplessness from, the reason I brought up the girls was because those were the wrong girls and this was the right one, right? So if I had let the string of no, 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 no ever stop me from asking the question, I never get a yes.
Right, and the ideal thing is that you find homeopathy early and you are brave enough to say, hey, I don't think I want to go the route of these surgeries or whatever.
But let's be realistic, that doesn't happen for most people. Mm-hmm. Most people don't find it early unless your mother was a homeopath or something like that. You find
there are a lot of mothers now who are wise enough to start their children on it.
And if you start your child like that, you're setting them up for a lifetime of health and vitality.
That's right.
But
they won't have to make these difficult choices.
Right.
Because their vital force will be able to work in the way it was meant to, with a little gentle help from homeopathy.
Right. But let's face it, most of us aren't like that. Okay? Most of us aren't like that. If you watch the show Biggest Loser, or one of our favorite shows, the people they pick to be on that show are not the people who are quitters. They're the people who've gotten to the point where they have hit rock bottom and they want to change their lives, and they're willing to do anything to do it. And those trainers and that system is there for them, and it works. I know there's a lot of controversy about it, but it works. So it's the same idea, that if you could let your negative experiences set you up for success by saying, I know the answer is out there, I'm going to find it, I'm going to pursue this. And when you do find homeopathy and you get some little tiny bit of success from it, or you've heard about somebody else having success and you're willing to give it a try, you have to approach it not as the person who's failed and it's always going to be this way. You have to approach it with optimism, and then this is the big word, commitment. Because yes, it is true that sometimes you're going to get it just like that, and maybe you're lucky and you get the boom, the first one. I have a old mentor of mine. Was a screenwriter. He wrote his first screenplay, sold his first screenplay. That never happens. He's the exception that proves the rule, right? Oh my God, never happens. And yet it happened for him. But most people, they try it, they sit it out once or twice, whatever. Famously, Emily Dickinson, who is one of the most influential writers of all times. While she was alive, she only sent out her stuff, submission for publication, a few times, I think less than 4 times. And she got these polite, like, dear little Miss Dickinson, you know, yeah, whatever, your poetry is not masculine enough or not up to snuff. And she died, and her sister found 900 poems, 900 poems that nobody knew she had written. And she went back to one of the guys who rejected her and said, now listen, my sister's a genius and you're going to publish this. And they got it done, and Emily Dickinson changed the world. So you can't take these little incidents of failure and let them cloud you from bringing this positive energy of expectation and commitment. You have to make a commitment. You may get it, boom, like that, and that's wonderful. And of course, every homeopath wants their clients to get that remedy that just really instantaneously makes a difference. But what I say to myself is, if something's happening, and I think most homeopaths can get something to happen, it may not be pleasant, fairly quickly. That means something good is going to happen, that it's around the corner, and you have to stick to the process. Because if you don't, you're really robbing yourself. You're robbing yourself of the amazing experience that this healing art form can provide. The last thing I want to say is, if you go to, let's say you want to learn karate, I've studied martial arts, okay, or a better example, let's say you want to be really good at pool. I read this, I'm not good at pool, and I read this in a book about pool, and it's not something that I aspire to be great at, but I love the story behind it. This pool expert, you know, I'm assuming he's won championships, and otherwise he wouldn't have a big book on pool, says the first thing you have to do when you want to be good at pool is you have to get the pool cue and the cue ball, and you have to practice this. And you have to do, I don't remember how many he said, 100,000, whatever, of these. No hitting balls in the pockets, not even the cue ball. None of it. Just this. And he tells all of his students, and he says, and he writes in his book, he says, and you know, it's really not that hard. If you do it 3 to 4 hours a day, you can get the reps done in a summer. So, you know, just devote, you know, your first 3 months of pool playing to this. And because if you don't refine that movement, you will never be able to do. There's a limit to how far you will be able to go in pool, and you will never cross over it. You'll never be a professional. You'll never win even your local tournament. You can play pool and pool and pool and pool and pool till the cows come home. So he said, he's like, and there are people who, and I've known this from figure skating too, I've had this experience, where you do, and it's fun and whatever, you're learning, you hit this limit, and you cannot get past it. And then you have to go back and relearn everything again, and do the 100,000 of these that was necessary. And now you might have to do 200,000 because you did so many wrong while you were having fun that you now have to do 200,000 to get it lined up. So if you just want to do it recreationally, that's fine. Skip that and just have fun playing pool. But if you're starting off saying, my goal is, the best thing you can do, right? The best thing you can do is to make the commitment to just knock out those reps that you have to do. Well, when you come to a homeopath, if you're sick, especially if you're really sick, the universe or whatever your concept of divine is saying, whoop, your life has to sort of stop right now. You have to get a grip on this. You have to fix this. So this is the time when you have to make a commitment, and you might as well just go ahead and say, this next 4 months is about me. It's about healing. It's about transforming myself. That's what they get to do on The Biggest Loser. But remember, those people make the decision to be there. They leave their normal life. They leave their family. They carve out what they need, because it's foolish to keep trying to squeeze it in around the edges.
Right. And I would
So-
say even better than waiting until you have a very serious health crisis, start working with homeopathy.
Yeah, that's
when
better.
You just have minor things. Start exploring with your homeopath what remedy will work in a deep way for me. Because everyone has ways that they can improve or areas that they can explore.
And you may
little
never have to
things.
have a big issue that way.
Right, and if you work on the small things, it's just like your diet or anything else. If you pay attention to the details early on, you don't get into a crisis, and so that's a very important.
But if you are into a crisis, which, like I said, is usually what makes you even go to a homeopath in the first place. You know, it's like anything. It's like you don't go to AA until you hit rock bottom. You know, most of us don't pray until, we're really, like we can do it all ourselves, but then all of a sudden, oh, Jesus help me, or whatever your concept of the divine is. And at that point in time, you got to recognize that you're not, things aren't, you need a dramatic change, and you need to apply consistent, committed work. And then you'll in short order change all the things that need to be changed, address the things that need to be addressed, and you will achieve your desired result. I talk a lot. I'm going to tell one more story. Again, this is not talk to the professional. You will have access to her, not me. You don't need to listen to me. You get to see her on Zoom anytime you want, okay? But this is my chance to say what I want to say about homeopathy. So I always tell this story. It is the best story about this idea. And I think the commitment part is the most important part. And I look, the times in my life when I've committed to losing weight, I've lost weight. And the times I haven't really made the commitment to digging out all the reasons why I got fat in the first place and the emotional ones, I stop. So it's like that way for anything in life. Whatever you make a commitment to, if you stick with it, you will get what your desired results. And if you don't, then okay, you didn't. And there's a very short story. Sometimes you don't want something. Like I play 15 different musical instruments, and I've kept them up. I've learned them over the years. I always dreamed of playing the bagpipe. And I went to this guy who was quite a well-known bagpiper in Seattle, and I gave him a check. Well, I actually didn't give him a check. I said, "Can I have a lesson?" And he said, "Okay, well, this is what it's going to be like. Here's this thing. Try this. It's a canter. Okay? You've got to play on this for 2 years first to develop your lungs, to have the power to do the pipes." So I tried it. It was very hard. You have to blow like the devil, and it makes this sound that's not pleasant. I'm like, 2 years? It's like, yeah, 2 years, at least 2 hours a day, every day. 2 years. Then you get to go to the pipes. And I said, oh, man. It's like, how bad do I want to play pipes? And then I said, well, can I just try the pipes? And he said, well, you're not going to be able to do it. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to make any sound. So you got to do 2 years. I said, well, can I just try it just for giggles? Okay, sure. So he gave me the silent pipes, and I'm like this. And the sound came out, and it was gone because I didn't have the back pressure to, did it again, and there was no wind. And I said, oh, okay, I get it. You got to spend 2 years on the canter. And then I said, I think I'm going to just stick with practicing fiddle right now. Here's your check for your lesson. Thank you very much. And I've never gone back because I know that it's 2 years to do that. Now, I might do it someday because I love the pipes, and there may be a point when I want to do it. So if it's something that you don't really want bad enough, there's nothing wrong with saying, this is not something that I want bad enough. But when it comes to your health, you may be required in this moment to make a commitment to it. And I gotta tell one last story, my favorite story, sorry, but I gotta tell a story I read in a fencing book, I believe. It's kind of, I don't know if it's true, or it's just a parable, one of those things, but it's one of my favorite stories about the importance of commitment and passion in anything you do. So there's this young kid who dreamed of being a champion fencer, and lucky for him, an old fencing master happened to live in his town. So he's 12 years old or whatever, and he goes to the fencing master and says, I'm going to pay you to give me a lesson and like watch me and tell me, do I have what it takes to be a champion? So the old man says, sure, yes, of course, I'll do that. And he does. And at the end of the lesson, the old man looks at him and says, you lack the fire. And the kid says, okay. He's disappointed, dejected, and he leaves with his head hung low, and he thinks to himself, well, I guess I can't be a fencing champion. I'll have to have a new dream. And he grows up, and he goes to school, and he starts a business, and he becomes a successful businessman, and has a family, and all is well in his world. And he's at some event, fundraiser or whatever, and he sees the old master there. And so he goes up to him, and he says, I want to thank you, because when I was young, you told me that I lacked the fire to become a champion. And because of that, I dedicated my life to business, and now I have a successful business, and I'm happy with my family. And the old master says, I tell that to all my students. And the kid goes, what? You mean I could have been a champion, and you told me I lacked the fire? Why did you do that? He said, if you had really had the fire, nothing I said would have dissuaded you. And I think that if you have the fire for natural healing in any of its amazing forms, and you make the commitment to it, you will get results. You will be a champion, and you will be able to provide a richer, fuller life for you and those you love. So that's my story.
Thank you, George.
Thanks, Abby.